Hi guys, for those of you that don't know, my name is Michael and I am the woodworker for MK Designs, and welcome to part 2 of the Mission Style Nightstand build. I had to separate the video up into multiple parts because there's just too much information and too many things to go over to be able to do it in one 30-minute or less video, and I try to keep my videos around 30 minutes or less. So yeah, let's get on to part 2. So this is where we left off. I am putting the drawer slide supports into the cabinet case, and I'm clamping the front, and then I'll put the piece of MDF into the back to clamp the back of it, and I'll let this sit overnight, clean up the glue, and then let it sit. And if you missed part 1, you can click on the link in the description down below and go back and watch that. Okay, let's build some drawers. So real quick show of hands, who recognizes this saw? Anybody? Yes. So everybody, most of you know that I have needed a miter saw for quite a while. I have one, but I don't trust it for this kind of woodworking. And James King's daughters bought him a Festool K-Pex for Christmas, and so he sold me his Bosch Glide. So this is actually a famous saw, sort of. It's the one from James King's shop. So if you haven't checked out his channel, be sure to go over and check out King's Fine Woodworking and see him and his daughters. They do fantastic work. And thank you, James, for selling me this saw. Thank you so very much. So what I'm doing here is I have 8/4 lumber, and the reason I've got 8/4 is because the drawers are going to be 9 and 3/4 inches tall, between 9 1/4 and 9 3/4 inches tall. And I couldn't get that out of a single board, so I got the 8/4 lumber, and I'm gonna resaw it in half and book match this front, sides, and back of the drawers. So right now I'm cutting it down to rough size on the miter saw, and then I'll get them resawed and go from there. So now the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to keep it flush up against the fence, and I've got the fence set to cut it right in half. And when I start to get close, so I can keep my fingers out of the way of the blade, I've got this push block from Microjig, and it really works. It's got the little gripper things on the bottom, and it keeps the piece flush and exactly where you need it to be. And then I'm going to reach around the other side and pull, just like that, and now you got your two pieces. So after I get them cut, I'm going to run them over the joiner and then through the planer just to clean them up a little bit, and then I'm going to glue them up. Like I said, I'm going to be book matching, so I'm going to glue on one edge, and I made sure I had two flat edges to be able to glue together, and yeah, it'll be long grain to long grain, so it'll be a good strong hold. So this is one of those little tricks that people don't tend to tell you about. When you don't have enough clamps, this is one way to make your clamps go further. Now, all the pieces you do this with, you have to make sure they're the exact same width, otherwise it won't work. You won't get enough clamping pressure on one, or you get too much on another, something along those lines. So basically, you put your first piece down and get it lined up, and then you put a couple pieces of wax paper down, and then you glue up your next one. In this method, I was able to get 3 or 4 within 2 parallel clamps, and they glued up nice and strong, and no issues whatsoever. And so here they all are, all clamped up. So after I let those sit overnight, then I'll run them through the planer to get them cleaned up. One of the downsides to using the wax paper method is you can't get the squeeze out that's in the center, and some of the wax paper winds up sticking to it, but the boards typically don't stick together. If they do, they're very easy to break apart. So just run them through the planer to get them cleaned up and get them down to the thickness that you're wanting before you cut your dovetails. So the very next thing you want to do is you want to get them cut down to size. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to cut a little bit off of each side. So if I need them at 9 1/4 inches and they're at 10 1/4 inches, then I will cut 1/2 inch off of both sides, effectively taking 1 inch off, and get them the same size. Then after that, you want to cross cut them using the same method as before, cutting one edge off to make it clean to sit flat against your stop block, and then cutting them to the length that you need. And now it's time to cut some dovetails. So I'm using half blind dovetails on these drawers. So I've got my jig set up for the half blind, I've got my tail board in the front, and I've got my pin board on top, and I'm going to make a climb cut just to score it to make sure it doesn't tear out on me. And then I'll come back and cut the full depth of the dovetails, and as always I'll do a test fit before I move to the second piece, and if it's too tight I'll adjust, if it's too loose I'll adjust, and once I have it all set up and lined up right, then I'll cut all of them. Now before I glue them up, I want to cut the dados for the drawer bottoms, but who can see what I'm doing wrong here? I wasn't thinking, and I set my fence up to cut the dado on with the long part between the fence. I should have had this entire setup turned around the other way. So I had a little bit of a kickback, and I'll show you the results of that. Luckily I didn't get hurt, but one of my pieces did get damaged. Now to cut the dado for the bottom of the top drawer, I have to cut it a little bit higher in order to make room for the hidden drawer that's going to go underneath the bottom of the top drawer. So I'm cutting roughly about the center of it. I don't remember the exact measurement, but it's all in the plans that I have online. The size of the hidden drawer is determined by a couple of factors. One, the size of your lock. Obviously need enough space in there for that, and the size of whatever you're going to be storing in it. So one last thing I have to do before I can actually glue them up is I need to take the fronts of the top drawer, and I need to cut out the space for the hidden drawer to fit into. I want to do that now so that it's easier to cut out and I don't have to worry about it messing up anything, and so that's what I'm doing, is I'm measuring out where I need to cut it for the hidden drawer access. So the way I'm going to cut it out is I'm going to use a jigsaw, and I'm going to cut a couple of relief holes in it first, and I'm just going to cut as close to the line as I can. Then I'll use a sanding stick or a wood rasp or something to take it down to the line. Now I can finally glue up the drawers. So I'm going to do that by putting glue on every possible surface and just piece it together like any other drawer. The only real difference is for the top drawers, I've got that gap in it for the hidden drawer, and so I need to be able to clamp it but without breaking those little pieces. So what I did was I cut out a piece of MDF the exact same size as the cutout, and I'll put it in there and then clamp it that way. Oh, and one more piece of advice when doing this, especially if it's for a customer: make sure your plywood is oriented the right way, front to back. I've got it the right way on this one, but I almost had a few slip-ups. Okay, so I lost the footage for what I did next. As you can see, let me flip this around. As you can see, this is the top drawer, and this is where the hidden drawer is going to go. And in order to get the hidden drawer in here and get the slides put in for it, there was this gap here, so I needed to fill it in. So what I did was this. I basically took scrap pieces, cut them to size, and milled them down to size, and glued them in here, and I will mount the slides. On these pieces here. This back piece is just simply for support, so you can have a little bit more weight in here and not have to worry about the bottom at all. So the next step before I install the drawers is to get them sanded, 80 grit, 100, 150, and 220 if necessary, and Kat decided to help me with that, and there's her foot. Once I get them all sanded, then I'm going to install them. First thing I need to do is I need to install the cabinet side of the drawer slide. So I've got two little 1/4-inch pieces of MDF just to lift them up a little bit, and I'll set them where I need them to go, and I'll drill one hole, put a screw in, then I'll drill a hole in the back, put a screw in. I usually put about 4 screws on the cabinet side, and I put about 3 screws in the drawers. Once I have the cabinet side done, then it's time to put on the drawers. So I put the slides back together, and then I'll slide my drawer in, and I'll take those 2 pieces of 1/4-inch MDF and split them up, put one on either side of the drawer, and I'll pull the drawer out just slightly, making sure it's flat, sitting against those 2 pieces of MDF. make sure the slide is where I need it to be, and I'll drill one hole and put a screw in. Then I'll go to the other side, drill a hole, put a screw in, and then I'll pull it out and I'll do one more on each side. And after that, I can then pull the drawer completely out and put the third screw in the very back. Now it's time to make the hidden drawers, and it's the same procedure as before. I will cut them to rough length, run them over the joiner, through the planer, and get them cut to exact length and width, and then cut my dovetails. The only difference is you don't cut a rabbet for the bottom, and I'll explain that here in just a few. Now when I glue these up, I need to make sure that they're perfectly squared, so I've got these corner blocks from Rockler, and I'm going to use them on the hidden drawer boxes to make sure that they're square, because I don't have the bottom to go into it to kind of help hold it square. Okay, so while the hidden drawers are drying, now would be a good time as any to start sanding the cases. And I'm going to start with 80 grit, mostly because I got extremely close, but there's a couple of places, like right there, where the dust frame is actually protruding a little bit from the top of the case, and vice versa. And I just want to get this whole thing as flat and level as possible. And then I'm going to go down the sides. Now, one thing I want to do, I'm not going to take the hand sander, the random orbit sander, to the plywood sides. I will hand sand those very lightly, starting at 150 grit. I will not use 80 or 100 on these, but on this part I will use 80, then 100, then 150, and 220 if necessary. Also, while I'm waiting on the hidden drawers to dry, I'm going to go ahead and cut the pieces for the false fronts on all 4 drawers. So again, I'm going to cut them to rough size, run them over the joiner, through the planer, cut them to exact size, and then glue them up. And I'm going to use the exact same method with the wax paper here that I did for the sides and the front and back of the drawers as well. And that way I can just use 2-3 clamps to get four of them in one set of clamps. And the way I make sure they stay flat is I'll use cawls on either side. That noise you're hearing in the background is the air flowing from my swamp cooler across the microphone on my camera. So now that the hidden drawers are dry, I need to make sure the bottoms and tops are flat and flush. And the best way to do that is with a big sanding block like this. It's just when you go to make one, make sure you don't have 2 sheets on top of each other, one on top of the other, when you're trying to glue them down, or otherwise you'll wind up with a gap like I have there. And that's exactly what happened. There was 2 sheets instead of just one, and that's the result. But it worked just fine. Now I want to go ahead and get the hidden drawers installed, and it's the same as with the other drawers. Just get them where you need them and mount them and put the screws in. Just be careful, make sure you get it all lined up flat. So now comes what I consider the fun part. We're going to install the locks that do that. Here we go. Now it's time to install the locks, and I'll put a link down in the description of everything that I used in this build. But these are the locks that I chose for this. They come with the main lock assembly and the latch, which goes on the bottom of the main drawer part, and the main lock assembly actually goes on the front inside of the hidden drawer. And then of course you got the 3 cards. You got 2 user cards, and a manager card, and it comes with all the hardware to be able to install it and so forth and so on. But the only thing it doesn't come with that you need are AAA batteries. And this is the exact reason you don't want the bottom of the hidden drawer in place just yet. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to get the main lock assembly positioned where I want it. I've got those two spacer blocks. That's where I'm going to put the latch. And I'm going to take the screw that you screw them in with and just mark the holes so I can pre-drill the hole to make it a little easier. Then I'll drill the hole and I'll put the screws in. So now here's how these locks work. With the two pieces together and the batteries in the main assembly, you take the user card and scan it, and it's spring loaded, and that's how it pops the drawer out. And then with the two pieces together, I'm going to put the hidden drawer in, turn the main drawer upside down, and I'm going to take my little spacers that I milled down to size to be able to fit between the bottom of the main drawer and the latch assembly, and I'm going to mark where I need to put those at. And to install them, I'm just going to use CA glue, thick CA glue, and activator. Using the activator, we'll have the CA glue set within 5 seconds, and it'll be a good strong hold. They're not going to go anywhere. They really don't have to hold any weight. They're just supporting the lock assembly. Now that I know where my locks are supposed to go, I am going to cut a rabbet in the bottom of the hidden drawer for the bottom. And there's two ways to do this. You can either round off the corners of the piece of plywood that you're going to put in it, or you can square off the corners of the drawer with a chisel. And I decided to square off the corners of the drawer with the chisel. It just made everything so much simpler. But a piece of advice if you're going to build this is wait until everything else is done before you install the bottom of the hidden drawer, because if you lock the drawer without batteries in it, or you need to make adjustments or anything like along those lines, once you glue it in, it's in, and it's really hard to get it out. So now I'm going to go ahead and install the false fronts, and I'm going to start by cleaning up one edge and then cutting them to exact length, and I'm going to sneak up on the fit. So I'm going to cut it to a little big, and then I'm going to shave just a hair off at a time to make sure it fits. I want about 1/8 of an inch gap all the way around. So yeah, I'm going to sneak up on the fit. And once again, when I'm trying to get the fit for the height, I'm going to take a little bit off of each side. So if I need to take 1/8 off, then I'm going to take a 1/16 off of one side, flip the board over, and take a 1/16 off the other side. Once I have them to the size that I want, then I'm going to install them. And the easiest way to do that is to use double-sided tape and adhere it to it, then pull it out and run some screws in the back. Now for the top drawer, because of the hidden drawer, I only want the false front attached to the hidden drawer only. Otherwise you'll never get it open if you attach it to the main part of the drawer. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to run some double-sided tape, and I'm going to attach the false front. Now for the bottom drawer, it's the exact same way, except you're attaching it to the entire front of the drawer, not just a part of it. So once I have those installed, then I want to install the hardware. I want to mark where my drawer pulls are going to go, and I want to get the holes drilled for them. So for the top drawer, because of where it's going to go, I don't want the screws to go all the way through the main part of the drawer, but they're going to have those little heads sticking out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill through the false front, and then I'm going to make a mark in the dead center of that hole using the drill bit, and then I will use a Forstner bit to create a little recess for the head of the screws to rest in on the main part of the drawer. And then from there it's just a matter of putting the drawer pulls in and attaching the screws. So the next to last thing I have to do before finishing is I need to make the tops. So again, it's rinse and repeat. I'm going to cut them to rough size, run them over the joiner, run them through the planer, get them cut down to exact size. The only thing is this time I need to plane them down to the exact thickness that I need before I glue them up and cut them down to final size, because I'm not going to be able to run these through my planer once I have them together. So I need to get them cut down to the exact thickness, and then I can just sand them flush and clean, get the glue off, and go from there. After I let the top sit overnight, I am going to attach them, and I'm going to pre-drill in the back side of the cabinet, and I'm going to make the hole a little bit bigger than necessary. This is for expansion and contraction of the wood, just in case it ever does. And it'll allow the top to stretch a little bit without breaking. That's the plan anyway. And I'm only going to do this on the back. The two screws that I place on the front are going to be just straight in. So once I have those drilled, then I'm going to lay my top down. This is all after I've gotten it sanded and ready to go. And then I'm going to set the case on top of it upside down, line everything up with a square, and run 4 screws into it. So the very last thing I have to do before I can finish is I have to figure out exactly what stain color I need it to be. So Kat is staining 4 blocks. I picked 4 different colors that come close to matching from what I could see, what I could remember, and we're going to take it to the customer's house and compare it and figure out the size. Turned out it was going to be about 3 coats of gun stock, and it matched pretty well. So now I can start the finishing process, and the very first thing I have to do is I have to break all the corners and edges. So I'm going to just take some 220 grit sandpaper, and I'm just going to go over the entire thing, drawers, cabinets, all of it, and break the edges. Now along the edges with the floating panels I need to be very careful, so I'm going to do this completely by hand, not with the hand sander itself. But I'm just going to take a piece of 220 grit sandpaper and break these as well. The very next thing I need to do is I need to clean up. So I'm going to brush all the dust off my table and use a shop vac and get it all up. Then I'm going to get all the dust up out of the shop, and then I will lay paper on the table, and then I'm going to set all 3 of them. Now I made 3. The reason I made 3 is the one on the far right is actually the model, the mock-up, and the proof of concept, so to speak. And I'm gonna wipe them all down with mineral spirits and make sure I've gotten all the glue off and everything and all the dust off, and go from there. So now I can start staining, and this is not a complicated process. You just have to be real careful, take your time, and make sure you get all the little spots. I even use a screwdriver in some of the corners to make sure that I get up in the corner. Here in Colorado, because it's so dry, basically I'm using an oil-based stain. So basically I will apply it on and wipe it off go with the grain, and then I'll wait about 2-3 minutes, and then I'll wipe off the excess. After about 30 minutes I can go and put on my second coat. So I can actually get this done, get all 3 coats applied in one day, and then I can start applying the lacquer. So I'll let them sit for about 24 hours, and then I'll start spraying the lacquer. And you can see that I've got all the drawer slides taped up. I did that instead of taking them out, just in case the screws strip. And actually, it was advice from Maya King. It was something that she suggested, so I figured I would try it with this one, and it actually worked really well. And so I'm going to start on the inside of the cabinets. And needless to say, I'm wearing a really good mask and safety glasses for this, because inside the cabinet it's actually spraying back in my face. So I was glad I was wearing those. And I'm going to start on the cabinet, and I'll just inside of the cabinet, and then I'll just spray it on. And I put about 5 or 6 coats total, and about 4 on the sides and about 6 on the top. So yeah, it was a very quick process. It only took me about 3 hours to get all 6 coats completed. And then I sanded it with 1500 grit sandpaper and wiped it down with the tack cloth and put everything back together. It was all good to go. So yeah, there you have it. That's it. That's the big project I've been talking about, like I said, for probably close to a year now. And yeah, it's just one of those things. It just took that long to get it done. And I know this is the first video in probably close to 3 months that I've released. That's why, because for the last 3 months I've been trying and fighting every day to get a little bit more done on these things and get them completed. And for the last, I would say, 3 weeks, I have been working non-stop, almost, as much as the weather would allow me. Pretty much from about 9 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon, every day, every single day, to get these things done. Because, yeah, there's just that much detail. And there was one day that I spent the entire day fighting with the placement of the lock, getting it just right so the drawers are closed just right. And yeah, it was a little complicated, but it was also challenging, and that's the biggest thing for me. If I can build something that challenges me, then that's when I'm going to be at my best and I'm going to be at my happiest. So again, I have plans available for anyone who wants to try and build these. They're available on my website. Put a link down in the description. And if you haven't done so already, please be sure and hit that subscribe button down below, and click that little bell to get notified of when I do come out with new videos. And if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. So until next time, guys, happy creating.